Daewon stood in the briefing room, arms crossed, staring at the holographic display floating above the metal table. The image showed a massive orbital station that looked like a flower made of steel and glass, spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. He had seen many strange things since Earth joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago, but this invitation still seemed odd. "You want me to learn alien kung fu?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at the government official sitting across from him. The woman in the dark suit smiled slightly. "It's called Velthari. It's one of the oldest martial arts in the galaxy. They're offering to teach humans for the first time in history." Daewon had spent 15 years in Taekwondo before his knees gave out. Then he moved into private security work, protecting corporate executives and politicians. He was good at his job because he understood violence, how to prevent it, and when necessary, how to use it. But learning from aliens, that was new territory. "Why me?" he asked. "You have the experience. You adapt quickly, and honestly, we need people who won't embarrass Earth on the galactic stage." She slid a data pad across the table. 12 humans total, 1 year of training. You'll live on their combat academy station with students from 100 different species. Daewon picked up the pad and scrolled through the details. The pay was excellent. The opportunity was unique. And if he was being honest with himself, private security work had become boring. "When do I leave?" he said. Across the city, Hana sat in her small apartment watching the same invitation message play on her wall screen. At 23 years old, she had already won 2 international mixed martial arts championships. Her coaches said she had an instinct for fighting that couldn't be taught. She could see patterns in an opponent's movement before they knew what they were doing themselves. The message explained that the Galactic Council wanted to share their ancient martial art with humanity as a gesture of friendship. Hana had replayed it 5 times, her heart racing with excitement. Training with aliens, learning techniques that had been developed over thousands of years. This was beyond anything she had dreamed of. She accepted the invitation immediately. 3 weeks later, Daewon found himself on a transport ship heading toward the Academy station. The seats were designed for multiple body types, which meant they were uncomfortable for everyone. He sat next to a young woman with short dark hair who kept fidgeting with her datapad. "First time in space?" he asked. She looked up and smiled nervously. "Is it that obvious?" "I'm Hana, Daewon." They shook hands. "You're one of the 12? "Yes, I do MMA back home." "You?" "Taekwondo." "Long time ago. Now I mostly stand around looking intimidating." Hana laughed. It was a genuine sound that made Daewon think she might be too young for whatever they were getting into. But then again, he had seen that intensity in her eyes. She was a fighter. The other 10 humans introduced themselves as the journey continued. There was Taisik, a quiet man in his 30s who had some kind of special forces background he didn't like talking about. There was Minji, a judo expert who seemed perpetually calm. The others came from various martial arts backgrounds, all handpicked for their skills and adaptability. When the transport docked at the Academy station, Daewon felt his stomach flip. The docking bay was enormous, easily 50 times the size of any building he had ever been in. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through the space. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some floated. One being appeared to be made entirely of crystalline structures that chimed softly as it moved. "Welcome, humans." The voice came from their left. Daewon turned to see a creature that looked like a massive praying mantis, easily 8 feet tall with 4 arms and a triangular head. Its mandibles clicked softly as it spoke through a translation device on its chest. "I am Instructor Kelvos. I will be your primary teacher during your time here." The 12 humans stared. Hana was the first to bow respectfully. "Thank you for accepting us, Instructor." Kelvos's head tilted slightly, studying her. "You show proper respect. Good, you will need humility here. Velthari is not learned quickly, even by species with natural talent. Humans are new to the galactic community. You are soft, slow, and fragile compared to most species. But the Council believes even you can learn the basics if you apply yourselves." Daewon bristled at the casual dismissal but said nothing. He had learned long ago that proving yourself through action worked better than words. Kelvos led them through the station corridors. The walls were made of some material that seemed to shift color slightly, responding to the beings walking past. They passed training halls where aliens practiced combat moves that defied physics as Daewon understood it. In one room, a creature with 6 legs moved so fast it appeared to teleport across the mat. In another, 2 beings circled each other in slow motion. their movements precise and deliberate. Velthari means the patient strike in the old tongue, Kelvos explained as they walked. It is not about speed or strength. It is about understanding energy, leverage, and timing. A master can defeat an opponent 10 times their size without using force, only by redirecting what is already present. They arrived at a large gymnasium with high ceilings and strange gravity panels on the walls. About 50 alien students were already present, practicing forms in perfect synchronization. The movement was beautiful, like watching water flow uphill. This is where you will spend most of your time, Kelvo said. You will begin with the first form. Most students take 3 months to learn it adequately. I expect humans will need 6, perhaps more. Do not be discouraged. Every species learns at their own pace. Hana stepped forward eagerly. Can we start now? Kelvos made a sound that might have been amusement. Eager. That is good for the young. Very well. All of you spread out on the mat. Copy what I show you. Do not try to understand yet. Just move. The instructor's 4 arms moved in a flowing pattern that seemed simple at first but became increasingly complex. It was like a dance, but with purpose behind every gesture. Daewon tried to follow along, his muscles protesting at the unfamiliar angles and positions. Beside him, Hana moved with more grace, but even she struggled with the alien geometry of the forms. After 10 minutes, Kelvos stopped them. Enough! That is enough for your first attempt. You will practice this single sequence for the next week. When you can perform it without thinking, we will add the second sequence. In 1 month, you should complete the first form. Tasik raised his hand. Instructor, how many forms are there in Velthari? 72 complete forms, Kelvos replied. Most students master 15 in their lifetime. True masters might achieve 25. The greatest warriors in history have learned perhaps 40. The number hung in the air. 1 form per month meant 6 years just to reach average competency. Daewon wondered if any of them would last that long. As they filed out of the gymnasium toward their assigned quarters, Hana walked beside Daewon. This is going to be harder than I thought, she admitted. Everything worth doing usually is, he replied. But privately, watching the alien students move with such effortless precision, he wondered if humans had any business being here at all. They were so far behind, so obviously outmatched. Still, something in him refused to accept defeat before even trying. He had spent his life learning to fight. Maybe, just maybe, humans could surprise these ancient beings. He didn't know it yet, but that surprise would change the galaxy forever. 6 months had passed since the humans arrived at the academy, and the morning training session was about to begin. Daewon stretched his arms above his head, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles. Good pain, the kind that meant growth. Around him, the other human students prepared in their own ways. Hana was already on the mat, moving through the 7th form with focused intensity. Instructor Kelvos entered the gymnasium, his 4 arms carrying data pads and what looked like holographic projectors. His mandibles clicked, and what the humans had learned was surprise or confusion. He had been making that sound more often lately when watching them train. Today we work on the 8th form, Kelvos announced to the mixed class of humans and aliens. This form teaches defense against multiple opponents. It requires patience and awareness of space around you. A large alien student named Chromath, who resembled a bear covered in scales, made a grumbling sound. Instructor, why do the humans continue to advance so quickly? It is not natural. They have learned 7 forms in 6 months. That should take 2 years. Kelvos's antennae twitched. I have been considering this question myself. Their progress is unusual. Daewon exchanged glances with Tasik. They had noticed the other students' growing resentment. The aliens who had been training for years were now being matched or even surpassed by the newcomers from Earth. It created tension in the training hall. We just practice a lot, Hana offered, trying to diffuse the situation. Every spare moment. It is more than practice, said a slender reptilian student named Kira. Her species, the Listens, were known for their combat prowess. You change the forms. You add things that are not part of Velthari. It is improper. Kelvos raised one of his arms, commanding silence. Kira speaks truth. I have observed this as well. Humans, you must maintain the purity of each form. Velthari has been perfected over 10,000 years. Your additions are not improvements, merely contamination. Daewon felt his jaw tighten but kept his mouth shut. He knew what Kelvos meant. When practicing, he couldn't help but add small variations, Techniques from Taekwondo that felt natural to him. A slight pivot here, a different stance there. But he didn't think of it as contamination. It was just his body finding the most efficient path. The class began, practicing the 8th form. Chelvos demonstrated, with his forearms moving in a complex pattern that created a defensive sphere around his body. The alien students watched respectfully, then began their attempts. Most of them moved slowly, carefully, trying to replicate exactly what they had seen. The humans watched too, but when they began practicing, something different happened. Hana moved through the form with fluid grace, but her version was slightly different from the demonstration. She had shortened one movement and extended another, creating better flow. She didn't even seem to realize she was doing it. Daewon found himself doing the same thing. His body automatically adjusted the form to match his height, reach, and muscle memory from decades of Taekwondo. The core principles remained the same, but the execution was uniquely his. Taisik practiced nearby, and his version was different again. His military training showed in his economy of movement, cutting away anything unnecessary. The form became sharper, more aggressive under his interpretation. Instructor Kelvos moved between students, correcting postures and positions. When he reached the human section of the mat, he stopped and observed in silence for a long moment. "Hana," he finally said, "show me that sequence again." "The defense against the high attack." She complied, moving through the motions smoothly. Kelvos circled her, his compound eyes examining every angle. "That is not the 8th form," he said. "Yes, it is, instructor. I'm following the pattern you showed us." "No. You are following the principle, but you have created something new. A hybrid," he paused. "Demonstrate with a partner. Chromath. Attack her as I taught in the previous form." The large alien student looked pleased to have the opportunity. He advanced on Hana with a powerful overhead strike, moving fast despite his size. Hana flowed to the side, used his momentum against him, and somehow the 300-pound alien ended up flat on his back on the mat. The gymnasium went silent. "How did you do that?" Chromath demanded, climbing to his feet. "That was not the proper defense. But it worked," Hana said quietly. Kelvos made several clicking sounds, his mandibles working rapidly. Again. Chromath, use more speed this time. They repeated the exercise 5 times. Each time, Hana successfully defended herself using techniques that were recognizably Velthari, but somehow different. The other alien students gathered around to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. "Unbelievable," muttered an insectoid student. "She has been training for 6 months. Chromath has trained for 4 years." After class, Kelvos called the human students to remain behind. When the gymnasium had emptied, he paced in front of them, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. "I must understand what is happening here. You learn faster than any species I have taught in 3 centuries. Why, what makes humans different?" Minji, the judo expert, spoke up. "Maybe it's because we already knew martial arts before we came here? We're not learning from scratch." "No," Kelvos said. "Many species come to Velthari with combat experience. That is not the answer." Daewon thought about the question seriously. Maybe it's because we're used to learning from different sources. On Earth, we don't have one martial art, we have hundreds. Karate, kung fu, boxing, wrestling, judo. I've met fighters who study 5 or 6 different styles. We're used to taking what works and mixing it together. Kelvos stopped pacing. "Mixing. Yes, that is what you do. You see Velthari and immediately begin combining it with your own techniques. Most species would consider this disrespectful, but you do it without thinking." "Is that wrong?" Hana asked. "I do not know," Kelvos admitted. "It is unprecedented. The Galactic Council teaches Velthari as a complete system, unchanged for millennia. But you humans, you cannot help but change everything you touch." Taisik leaned against the wall. "Evolution. Things either adapt or they die. That's true for species, and maybe it's true for fighting styles too." "Heresy?" Kelvos said, but his tone was uncertain. "And yet I cannot argue with results. Hana defeated Chromath easily. He is bigger, stronger, and has trained far longer. But her adapted form was more effective in that moment." The instructor was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Finally, he looked at the 12 humans with what might have been respect in his alien eyes. "Continue your training. I will not stop you from adapting the forms. But know that other instructors are watching. Some are fascinated by you, others are disturbed. The Grand Proving Tournament is in 3 months. That is when students demonstrate their skills before the entire academy. It will be a test for all of you." As they left the gymnasium, Daewon walked beside Hana. You embarrassed Chrometh today. He won't forget that, she nodded. I know, but I wasn't trying to show off. The movement just felt right, like my body knew what to do before my brain did. That's called instinct. It's what makes you dangerous. Daewon smiled slightly. Keep developing it, but watch your back. Not everyone here is happy about humans being good at this. Over the following weeks, the human students continued to progress at an alarming rate. They worked through the 9th, 10th, and 11th forms, each time unconsciously adapting and modifying the techniques. The other students noticed. Some approached the humans with curiosity, asking to train together. Others grew more resentful, whispering in the corridors about humans cheating or being genetically modified. Instructor Kelvos spent more time observing the humans and less time correcting them. He filled data pads with notes, sent reports to the Combat Council, and had long conversations with other instructors late into the station's night cycle. One evening, Daewon found Hana practicing alone in one of the smaller training rooms. She was working through a sequence that combined the 8th form with what looked like Brazilian jiu-jitsu ground fighting techniques. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. You're going to win your division at the Grand Proving, Daewon said from the doorway. Hana stopped and wiped sweat from her forehead. Maybe, but I feel like we're causing problems we don't fully understand. Progress always causes problems. People fear change. He stepped onto the mat. Show me that last combination again. I want to learn it. She smiled and began the sequence. This, Daewon realized, was what humans did best. They learned from each other, shared knowledge freely, and built on what came before. The aliens kept their techniques pure and unchanged, which preserved them perfectly. But humans couldn't help but evolve everything they touched. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that evolution. The Grand Proving would provide an answer. The Grand Proving arena was unlike anything Daewon had ever seen. The circular combat floor sat at the center of a massive dome, surrounded by viewing platforms that rose up in tiers. Thousands of alien students, instructors, and holographic observers from across the galaxy filled the space. The air hummed with anticipation and the translation of 100 different languages. Daewon sat in the preparation area with the other human competitors, trying to stay calm. All 12 of them had qualified for the tournament, which itself was remarkable. Most species only sent a handful of their students to compete. The fact that every human made it through the preliminary rounds had caused quite a stir. First match, Junior Division, announced the arena's sound system. Hana of Earth versus Kelvin of Rigel 7. Hana stood up, rolling her shoulders to loosen them. At 23, she was the youngest human competitor. Her opponent was a Rigelian, a species known for their quick reflexes and natural flexibility. They could bend their bodies in ways that seemed to defy bone structure. Remember, Taesik said quietly. He's faster, but you're smarter. Hana nodded and walked onto the arena floor. The crowd's noise dimmed as the match prepared to begin. Her opponent was tall and thin with blue-gray skin and large, dark eyes. He bowed respectfully and she returned the gesture. The signal to begin sounded. Kelvin moved immediately, his long limbs whipping out in a strike pattern from the 3rd form. Fast, precise, textbook, perfect. Hana didn't try to match his speed. Instead, she slipped sideways, used a defensive move from the 8th form, and suddenly Kelvin was off balance. She followed with a combination that was definitely not pure Velthari, something that looked like it came from 3 different martial arts mixed together. The Rigelian hit the mat hard. The crowd made various sounds of surprise across multiple species. Kelvin got up quickly, more cautious now. They circled each other. This time, when he attacked, Hana met him with the patience of Velthari, redirecting his energy and using his own momentum against him. But the finishing move was all human, a quick strike combination that ended the match in under 2 minutes. The preparation area erupted with cheers from the human students. On the arena floor, Hana helped Kelvin to his feet. He looked confused but accepted her hand. "How did you move like that?" he asked through his translator. "Those were not proper forms. I adapted them," Hana said simply. "I hope I didn't offend you." "Offend? No, you defeated me fairly." Kelvin tilted his head. "But you have only trained for 8 months. I have trained for 5 years." "How is this possible?" Hana didn't have a good answer, so she just bowed again and left the arena floor. As she returned to the preparation area, she could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching her. Some looked impressed. Others looked angry. The tournament continued through the morning. Minji faced a heavily armored Crothian and won by finding weak points in his defense that shouldn't have been there. Taesik fought a Lisan warrior twice his size and used pure technique to overcome the strength difference. Each human victory was decisive and used fighting styles that no instructor quite recognized. By afternoon, Daewon's match arrived. He faced Kira, the reptilian Lisan who had questioned the humans' methods from the beginning. She was good, well-trained, and clearly wanted to prove that humans were not as skilled as they appeared. They met in the center of the arena. Kira's green scales caught the light as she moved into an opening stance from the fifth form. Daewon recognized it immediately and took his own stance. The signal sounded. Kira attacked with the aggressive confidence of someone who had been training for years. Her strikes were powerful and fast, each one following the traditional Velthari patterns. Daewon defended using the patience the style demanded, redirecting her energy and waiting for his moment. Then he saw it. An opening. His body moved before his conscious mind registered the opportunity. He slipped inside her guard with a movement that was part Velthari and part Taekwondo, struck with precision at 3 pressure points he had learned in the 11th form, and finished with an explosive kick that was pure earth martial arts. Kira staggered backward and fell. The match was over. The crowd was silent for a moment, then burst into a mixture of cheers and angry sounds. Daewon offered his hand to help Kira up, but she refused, standing on her own. Her eyes held both respect and resentment. "You fight well," she admitted, "but that was not Velthari." "It was my version of it," Daewon replied. Kira left the arena without another word. Daewon could feel the weight of judgment from thousands of observers. He had just demonstrated publicly that humans could not only learn Velthari, but transform it into something new. That revelation would have consequences. The semifinals arrived the next day. The arena was even more crowded, with important council members attending in person rather than holographically. Instructor Kelvos sat in the instructor section, his forearms folded, his expression unreadable. Hana faced a Velthari champion from the Tive species, the same insectoid race as Kelvos. The champion was older, more experienced, and moved with the kind of effortless grace that came from a lifetime of training. But Hana had something the champion didn't expect: unpredictability. The match was longer and more technical than Hana's previous fights. The Tiv champion knew all 72 forms and could transition between them seamlessly. But every time he thought he understood Hana's pattern, she changed it. She mixed forms, created combinations that shouldn't work but did, and fought with a creativity that seemed to frustrate him. In the end, Hana won not through strength, but through innovation. She used a defensive technique from the 15th form, combined it with a ground fighting move that wasn't from Velthari at all, and caught the champion in a position he couldn't escape from. When he tapped the mat in submission, the arena exploded with noise. Hana had just become the first human to defeat a Velthari champion. The implications were staggering. Taesik's semifinal match was equally impressive. He faced a massive Crothian warrior who had won the tournament for the past 3 years. The fight was brutal. Taesik took several hard hits that would have knocked out most beings, but he kept coming back. His military training showed in his ability to endure pain and continue fighting. When he finally won by using a joint lock that made the Crothian yield, the crowd was on their feet. The finals took place that evening. The arena was absolutely packed. Galactic news feeds were broadcasting the event across known space. Hana's final match in the junior division was against another human, Minji. They knew each other's styles well from training together, which made for an interesting and respectful fight. Hana won, but barely, and both women embraced afterward. Taesik's final match was against a Velthari master who had trained for 20 years. The fight lasted over 10 minutes, both fighters showing incredible skill and endurance. In the end, Taesik lost by a narrow margin, but the fact that he came so close was remarkable. He took second place with pride, knowing he had given everything he had. When the tournament concluded, all 12 humans had placed in the top 50 competitors out of 300 entries. 5 humans made it to the finals in their respective divisions. 2 won their divisions outright. The statistics were impossible to ignore. As Daewon stood with his fellow humans on the arena floor for the closing ceremony, accepting their rankings and honors, he could see Instructor Kelvos in the viewing area. The old instructor was having what looked like an intense conversation with several high-ranking officials. Their body language suggested disagreement, possibly anger. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some species cheered for the humans' achievement. Others remained silent or made sounds of disapproval. A group of traditional Velthari practitioners left the arena entirely, rather than watch humans receive honors. That night, as the human students celebrated in their quarters, Day One stood by the viewing window looking out at the stars. Hana joined him, still wearing her tournament medal. "We did something today," she said. "I'm not sure if it was good or bad, but it was something." "We proved humans can compete at this level," Day One replied. "But we also proved we can't help changing everything we touch. Some people will never forgive us for that. Do you think they'll ask us to leave? Maybe. Or maybe they'll try to figure out how we did it." He looked at her medal. "Either way, the galaxy is paying attention to humanity now. We're not just the new species anymore. We're the ones who adapted their most sacred martial art in less than a year." Hana touched the medal thoughtfully. "Master Kelvos looks troubled. I saw him being summoned by the Combat Council after the closing ceremony. He's probably being asked to explain how his students corrupted Velthari," Day One said. "That's not fair to him. He's been a good teacher. Should we have tried harder to keep the forms pure?" Day One thought about that question. Could they have fought any other way? Could they have turned off the part of their human brains that naturally adapted and evolved everything they learned? He didn't think so. "We fought the only way we know how," he finally said, honestly and with everything we had. If that's not good enough for them, that's their problem, not ours. But deep down he worried about what would come next. 3 months had passed since the grand proving, and everything had changed. Day One sat in the Academy's administrative wing, waiting to be called into a meeting he wasn't sure he wanted to attend. The corridor was quiet except for the soft hum of the station's environmental systems and the occasional clicking of passing alien personnel. The tournament videos had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. What the humans thought was a simple martial arts competition had become a political incident. Some species praised Earth students for their innovation and skill. Others called it cultural contamination and demanded action from the Galactic Council. The door opened and Ambassador Yoon Seo emerged, looking tired. She was Earth's primary diplomatic representative to the Council, a job that had become much harder lately. "They want to see you now," she said. "All 12 of you. Be respectful, but don't apologize for anything. You've done nothing wrong." Day One gathered the other humans and they entered the council chamber together. It was a large room with seats arranged in a circle, each one sized for different species. About 30 beings sat there, representing the most important voices in galactic combat training. At the head sat High Magistrate Korveth, a tall, stern-looking alien from a species known for their strict adherence to tradition. "Humans," Korveth began, his voice carrying weight and authority. "You have created quite a situation. The Combat Council has received thousands of petitions regarding your participation in Velthari training. Some praise you. Many condemn you. We must decide how to proceed." "With respect, Magistrate," Ambassador Yoon Seo said carefully, "my people have only done what was asked of them. They learned Velthari to the best of their abilities." "They learned it and then corrupted it," said a council member from the insectoid faction. "We have analyzed the tournament footage. What they perform is not Velthari. It is something else, something hybrid." Hana stepped forward slightly. "Is it wrong to adapt teachings to our own bodies and capabilities?" "We're built differently than most species. We just did what felt natural." "Natural for you is unnatural for thousands of years of tradition," Korveth replied. "Velthari is taught as a complete system, unchanged since its creation. You have altered it in months. This troubles many." Taisik spoke up, his military bearing evident. "If Velthari cannot accommodate different species, then perhaps it should not be taught to different species. You invited us to learn. We learned. If you don't like how we learn, that's not our fault." The chamber erupted in sounds of outrage and approval depending on the council member. Korveth raised a hand for silence. "You speak boldly, human, but you touch on the core issue. Should Velthari remain pure or should it evolve? This question divides us." He gestured to the split room. "Half this council wants to restrict your access to advanced training. The other half is curious about what you have created." Over the following weeks, the situation grew more complex. Several alien species secretly contacted Earth's diplomatic mission. asking to learn the human hybrid style. They had seen the effectiveness of the adapted techniques and wanted that advantage. But publicly, many of those same species criticized humans for disrespecting galactic traditions. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Daewon's tournament performances had made him a minor celebrity. He received hundreds of offers to teach, to demonstrate, to explain what he had learned. When he returned home for a brief visit, he found that dojos across the planet were already trying to incorporate Velthari principles into their training. He opened a small school in Seoul, teaching what he called integrated combat arts. The first class had 30 students. Within 2 weeks, there were over 200, and the waiting list kept growing. Humans, it seemed, were hungry for this new martial art. Hana faced a different situation. The academy had offered her an unprecedented position as a junior instructor, teaching mixed-species combat techniques. It was an honor, but it also made her a symbol of everything the traditionalists opposed. She received threats from radical Velthari purists who believed she was destroying their heritage. "I'm just trying to help people learn," she told Daewon during one of their video calls. "But some beings act like I'm committing a crime." "You're threatening their entire worldview," Daewon replied. "They've been teaching the same way for thousands of years. Then humans show up and do it differently, and it works. That's terrifying for them." Back at the academy, Instructor Kelvos faced his own crisis. The Combat Council had summoned him to explain how he had lost control of the human students. He sat before his peers, many of whom had taught for centuries, and tried to explain something he barely understood himself. "The humans learn differently," he said, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. "Their brains form connections faster. They see patterns and adapt them immediately. I did not teach them to change Velthari. They simply could not help doing so." "Then you should have stopped them," said an elderly instructor. "You are the teacher. You control what happens in your gymnasium." "I tried," Kelvos admitted, "but every time I corrected them, they would make the same adaptations unconsciously. It is built into how they think." "Then perhaps humans should not be taught at all," another instructor suggested. Kelvos felt something inside him resist that idea. Over the past year, he had grown to respect his human students. They worked harder than most species he had taught. They were respectful, dedicated, and genuinely passionate about learning. The fact that they adapted the teachings was not malicious. It was just who they were. "I do not believe we should bar them," Kelvos said firmly. "Yes, they change what they learn. But is change always bad? I have taught Velthari the same way for 300 years. In that time, the art has not grown or evolved. It has remained static. Perhaps the humans are showing us something important." "Heresy," someone muttered. But others in the council chamber looked thoughtful. The oldest instructor present, a being who had lived for over 1,000 years, spoke in a quiet voice that demanded attention. "I remember when Velthari was young," she said. "It was not always 72 forms performed exactly the same way. It grew from many different fighting styles, adapted and refined over centuries. We made it pure and perfect, yes, but in doing so we also made it static. Perhaps it is time for growth again." The debate continued for hours. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the situation escalated. A group of radical traditionalists challenged human practitioners to unsanctioned duels, trying to prove that hybrid styles were inferior to pure Velthari. Most of these challenges ended badly for the traditionalists, which only increased their anger. Daewon received a formal challenge from a Velthari master who had trained for 40 years. The master wanted to face him publicly, to demonstrate once and for all that true Velthari was superior to the human corruption. The challenge was broadcast across the galaxy. "Don't do it," Ambassador Yunseo advised. "If you win, it makes things worse. If you lose, it makes Earth look weak. Either way, it's bad for diplomacy." "And if I refuse?" Daewon asked. "They'll say humans are cowards who only won the tournament through luck." Daewon thought about it. He was tired of being used as a political symbol. He just wanted to train and teach, but this was bigger than him now. "I'll accept the challenge," he decided, "but on one condition. Instructor Kelvos must serve as referee. He knows both traditional and adapted Velthari. He can judge fairly." The challenge match was scheduled for 2 months away, giving both fighters time to prepare. The event would take place at the Academy Station, broadcast live across hundreds of worlds. The pressure was immense. Hana volunteered to help Daewon train. "You taught me when we first arrived," she said. "Let me return the favor. They worked together every day, refining techniques and strategies. Tysic joined them, bringing his tactical military mind to analyze the Velthari master's fighting style from archived footage. Other humans contributed too, each one adding something unique to the preparation. This, Daewon realized, was humanity's true strength. They shared knowledge freely, built on each other's ideas, and improved collectively. The traditionalists guarded their techniques jealously, each master keeping secrets. Humans made everything open source. As the challenge date approached, Instructor Kelvos came to watch one of Daewon's training sessions. He observed in silence for a long time. "You will fight Korath, a true master of Velthari," Kelvos said finally. "He has never been defeated." "Then I'll probably lose," Daewon replied honestly. "But I'll give him a real fight. That is all anyone can ask." Kelvos hesitated, then added, "I want you to know, regardless of the outcome, I am proud to have taught you. All of you. You have challenged me to think differently about what I do. That is valuable even if others cannot see it yet. Thank you, instructor. That means a lot." The night before the challenge, Daewon stood at his quarters window, looking out at Earth floating in the distance, somewhere down there. Billions of people were watching him, waiting to see if humanity's new way of fighting could stand against galactic tradition. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but he would carry it. That's what humans did. They adapted, they persevered, and they faced challenges head-on, no matter how impossible they seemed. The arena was more crowded than during the grand proving. Representatives from 50 different species filled the viewing platforms, along with holographic projections of beings watching from across the galaxy. The challenge match had become a symbol of something larger than two fighters meeting on a mat. It represented tradition versus evolution, the old way versus the new. Daewon entered the arena to mixed reactions, cheers from some sections, silence from others. He wore simple training clothes and carried himself with quiet confidence. Across the arena floor, Korath emerged from the opposite entrance. The Velthari master was tall and moved with the kind of grace that only came from a lifetime of perfect practice. He was twice Daewon's age and had never lost a match. Instructor Kelvos stood at the center of the arena, serving as referee as Daewon had requested. His forearms were clasped behind his back, his mandibles still. This match would determine many things, not least of which was his own reputation as a teacher. "This is a formal challenge match under traditional Velthari rules," Kelvos announced. His voice amplified throughout the arena. "First to 3 clear points wins. Strikes must be clean and controlled. Excessive force results in disqualification. Fighters approach." Daewon and Korath met in the center and bowed to each other. Korath's eyes held absolute certainty. He believed in his skills, in his training, in the purity of his art. Daewon respected that confidence but didn't fear it. "Begin," Kelvos said. Stepping back, Korath opened with the first form, executed so perfectly it looked like a holographic demonstration. Each movement flowed into the next with mechanical precision. Daewon responded with his own version of the first form, but his body added small variations automatically, adjustments that made the form work better for human physiology. They circled each other, testing distances and reactions. Korath attacked first, a strike combination from the 7th form. Fast, efficient, lethal if it connected. Daewon defended using principles from the 8th form, but incorporated a defensive rotation from Taekwondo. The combination worked barely, and he avoided the strike by centimeters. The crowd made various sounds of appreciation. Even those who opposed human involvement had to admit the skill on display. Korath pressed his advantage, transitioning through multiple forms seamlessly. He was testing Daewon, seeing how much the human actually knew. Daewon defended patiently, using the redirection principles that were core to Velthari. But every defense was slightly different, adapted, evolved. 5 minutes into the match, Korath landed the first clean point with a strike that Daewon couldn't avoid. The master's technique was flawless. The crowd cheered for tradition. They reset. This time, Daewon took a different approach. Instead of trying to match Korath's perfection, he embraced unpredictability. He mixed forms that weren't meant to be mixed, combined Velthari with Earth martial arts in ways that made the traditionalists uncomfortable. It was messy, imperfect, but effective. Korath struggled to adapt. His training had prepared him for opponents who followed established patterns. Daewon's style had no pattern, or rather, It had too many patterns overlapping. When Day One scored his first point with a combination that was part Velthari and part Judo, the master's expression showed surprise for the first time. The match continued. Both fighters scored points, demonstrating incredible skill and endurance. At 2 points each, with both fighters breathing hard, Korath paused. "You fight well," the master said, a hint of respect in his voice. "But you do not fight Velthari." "I fight my version of it," Day One replied, "with respect for what you taught me." "Respect? You have corrupted the forms. I have adapted them. There's a difference." They engaged again for the final point. This exchange lasted over 3 minutes, both fighters giving everything they had. Korath used techniques from forms that were rarely seen in competition, advanced skills that required decades to master. Day One responded with creativity, combining whatever worked in the moment. In the end, it was Korath's experience that won. He feinted with a technique from the 20th form, drew Day One into committing to a defense, then struck with a completely different attack pattern. The third point was his. The match was over. Korath had won, but barely, and everyone watching knew it. As they stood together in the center of the arena, Kelvos raised Korath's arm in victory. The traditionalist sections of the crowd erupted in celebration, but other sections cheered for Day One, recognizing that even in defeat he had proven something important. A human with less than 2 years of training had pushed a 40-year master to his absolute limit. Korath surprised everyone by bowing deeply to Day One. "You have shown me something today. Perhaps change is not always corruption. Perhaps it is sometimes evolution." He paused, then added, "I would be honored to train with you to understand this hybrid style." The arena went silent. A Velthari master had just acknowledged the validity of human adaptation. The implications were staggering. The next day, the Galactic Council convened to make a final decision about human involvement in Velthari training. The debate chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Ambassador Yunseo sat in Earth's designated seat, prepared to defend her people's right to continue learning. High Magistrate Korveth called the session to order. "We have seen the evidence. We have witnessed the challenge match. We have heard arguments from all sides. Now we must decide. Should humans be restricted from advanced Velthari training, or should we embrace this new development?" Instructor Kelvos was called to testify. He stood before the council with his forearms spread in a gesture of openness. "I have taught for 3 centuries, he began. "I have trained thousands of students across dozens of species. I believed Velthari was perfect, unchanged, because it could not be improved. The humans proved me wrong." He paused, letting that sink in. "They did not destroy Velthari. They showed us it could grow again. When I first learned this art, it was not 72 perfect forms. It was a living, evolving discipline. Somewhere along the way, we made it static. The humans reminded us what it was supposed to be." A council member objected. "But the purity of technique is less important than effectiveness and growth," Kelvos interrupted, something he would never normally do. "Korath is the greatest living Velthari master, and a human with 2 years of training nearly defeated him. Not through corruption, but through adaptation. That should tell us something." The elderly instructor who had spoken during previous debates stood slowly. At over 1,000 years old, her words carried enormous weight. "I remember," she said in her quiet, commanding voice. "When Velthari was young and flexible, each generation added to it, refined it, made it better. Then we decided it was perfect and froze it in place. That was our mistake, not the humans. They are simply doing what we should have been doing all along, evolving." The debate continued for hours. Finally, a vote was called. When the results appeared on the display screens, Ambassador Yunseo felt relief wash over her. The motion to restrict humans had failed. Instead, a new proposal had passed, the Open Hand Accords. Under the Accords, humans could continue learning Velthari without restriction, but in exchange they had to teach their adaptations openly, making them available to any species that wanted to learn. The hybrid styles would be recognized as legitimate variations rather than corruptions. Most importantly, the Accords established joint training facilities where multiple species could learn from each other, sharing techniques and evolving together. Kelvos was offered the position of director for the first joint academy. He accepted immediately and asked Hana to serve as his assistant instructor. She agreed, honored and slightly terrified by the responsibility. Day One returned to Earth and established the planetary training program. Within a year, there were over 50 schools teaching integrated combat arts across the globe. Students from other species began coming to Earth to learn, creating the first reverse cultural exchange in galactic history. Taysik opened a military training facility that taught human-adapted Velthari to security forces. His program became so successful that other species' militaries requested access, leading to joint training exercises and improved cooperation between different worlds' defense forces. 5 years after the initial invitation, Daewon stood in his school in Seoul watching a class in progress. The students included humans, Rigelians, Crothians, and even a TIV instructor who had come to learn the hybrid style. They moved together on the mat, combining techniques from a dozen different sources, creating something new. Hana visited from the Joint Academy, bringing updates on its progress. "We have over 300 students now," she told Daewon. 15 different species, all learning from each other. Instructor Kelvo says it reminds him of what Velthari must have been like thousands of years ago, before it got frozen in tradition, Daewon said. Exactly. He's writing a new curriculum that incorporates adaptive principles. He says humans taught him that martial arts should serve the practitioner, not the other way around. They watched the mixed species class for a while. A human student was showing a Lycan how to adjust a throw for their different body structure. A Crothian was teaching a human about using momentum more efficiently. The exchange was natural, respectful,